American wheat is at risk of being dumped and left to rot in the fields. Not because of pests or storms, but simply because no one is buying it. Just across the northern border, Canada has quietly signed multi-billion-dollar deals to export premium-grade wheat to Asian nations at nearly double the price. As an American, have you ever imagined that one day our country, a nation that once fed the world, would face such a terrible phase? When did it happen? When did the American farmer, long a symbol of hard work and self-reliance, get pushed to the sidelines on his own land? This isn't just a bad season. This is a silent shift, one that's slowly shaking the foundation of the global food supply chain. Is this the result of a strategic failure by the United States? Or is it a carefully calculated victory from Canada? What is really happening here? Today's video will give you the full picture of the crisis that's quietly swallowing American agriculture. Before we begin, please note this video is for educational purposes only. It presents facts and opinions from public sources and does not aim to promote any political agenda. Do you remember the last time you saw the words "Made in USA" on a bag of flour, a carton of milk, or a tray of meat at the grocery store? Chances are it's been a while. Because today, if you walk down the aisles of your local Walmart, you'll notice something strange happening. The products that once symbolized American agriculture, soybeans, beef, eggs, bread, fruit, are now stamped with "Product of Canada." According to data from the Federal Bankruptcy Court, the U.S. saw nearly 3,000 farm bankruptcies in 2024 alone, the highest number since the 2008 financial crisis. That's an average of more than 50 farms going under every single week, and most of them are from the heartland, the traditional agricultural state. In Iowa, once proudly known as America's Rice Bowl, millions of bushels of soybeans now sit abandoned beneath tarps in the fields. No buyers, no contract. Meanwhile, Canada is quietly exporting soybeans straight into the U.S. market. Soy products from Ontario now make up as much as 70% of the shelf space in Des Moines supermarkets. And Iowa's farmers, they're watching imported goods flood their hometowns while filling out paperwork for subsidies just to survive. Farmers like Mr. Marvin, who has been growing soybeans for 38 years, shared, "I used to have contracts signed before I even planted the seeds. Now no one's calling. I call them and they say, 'Sorry, we've signed with Canada.' The picture isn't any brighter in Nebraska. Meatpacking plants there are running at a crawl. Not due to a lack of cattle, but because they don't have enough workers left willing to handle the cold, noisy conditions. And as Nebraska slows down, Canada moves in to fill the gap. Slab by slab, tray by tray, Canadian beef crosses the border onto American dinner plates. No flashy marketing, no negotiations, just quiet replacement. Large slaughterhouses have been forced to cut processing capacity from 6,000 animals per day down to just 1,500. Following a wave of strict immigration inspections, thousands of immigrant workers who had been quietly enduring extremely harsh working conditions have disappeared. There's no one to replace them and no clear policy to fill that gap. Next comes the weather factor. Prolonged droughts have dried up pastures, sending livestock feed costs soaring out of control. Small farms already operating on razor-thin margins are now forced to sell off young cattle early to cut losses or worse, go bankrupt. And then there's Missouri. When H5N1 struck, over 2 million birds were called, egg prices shot past $6 per dozen, and stores began limiting purchases. Guess whose products showed up on the shelves? That's right, Canada. Again, eggs from British Columbia replaced American supply in Missouri, not with fanfare, but with function. You might think it's just an egg, but what it really is a loss of control over the supply chain, starting from the most basic meal of the day. A single mother in St. Louis shared, "I have to choose between buying eggs or putting gas in the car to get to work. Eggs used to be the cheapest item. Now they're a luxury." Kansas, once known as the nation's breadbasket, it is also steadily losing orders. Although wheat output remains high, quality has become inconsistent due to extreme weather and depleted soil. What's more concerning is that international partners, companies producing industrial bread, pasta, and pizza, are no longer willing to accept the unpredictability of wheat quality from Kansas. They demand consistency, and once again, Canada is emerging as the preferred alternative. This shift isn't just about canceled contracts. It's a clear sign that trust in American agricultural products is eroding, not because of poor yields, but because the support system behind American farmers is proving to be unsustainable. Even California hasn't escaped this decline. Once responsible for more than a third of the nation's fruits and vegetables, the Golden State is now drying up. With irrigation levels slashed to just 3,550% of normal, countless farms have abandoned their orchards, uprooted trees, or left their fields tow. We had to cut down a third of our citrus trees because there wasn't enough water. And the subsidies didn't arrive in time, said Mr. Raon, a farm owner in Fresno. Every tree we removed wasn't just a loss, it was 7 years of investment wiped out. And just as California fades, Canada rises. Cherries from British Columbia, apples from Quebec, tomatoes from Ontario, they now flow into American markets as a steady, high-priced, but dependable stream. Consumers still buy them because, quite simply, American-grown products no longer exist. But what's more alarming is this. It's not just Americans turning away from U.S. agriculture. The world is too. In Asia, China, once the largest export market for American soybeans and beef, is shifting toward Brazil and Argentina. The reason isn't just price. It's trust. China no longer believes in the stability of Washington. Trade policies change overnight. Tariffs are imposed, then lifted, then slapped back on again, making long-term contracts far too risky. Meanwhile, Brazil offers a 10-year commitment, no tariffs, and on-time shipping. Today, they buy less from the U.S. Tomorrow, they might stop buying altogether. In Europe, once a premium market for American beef and wheat, new quality and environmental standards are quietly pushing the U.S. out of the game. The EU doesn't accept meat with growth hormone residue, nor wheat treated with glyphosate. Canada, Ireland, even Uruguay are stepping in. Global supply chains that once relied on the U.S. are cutting the cord. Not out of spite, but because the U.S. is no longer seen as a reliable option. In Africa, where the U.S. was once the leading food aid provider, countries like Ethiopia, Ghana, and Nigeria are forging new partnerships with Russia and China. Russia is canceling grain debts. China is building cold storage facilities and logistics networks, things the U.S. promised but never delivered. While Congress debates debt ceilings and foreign aid cuts, America's rivals have finished the factories, opened the roads, and signed the 25-year contracts. As American farmers abandon their fields, Canada is racing ahead. Not only are they capturing premium wheat contracts, Connors, they're quietly rebuilding their entire trade structure. In the past 12 months alone, Canada has signed major deals with the European Union, the United Arab Emirates, and Indo-Pacific partners. The total trade value, $214 billion. Not a single dollar of it points south toward the United States. Canada is rerouting. Once heavily dependent on the U.S. with nearly 76% of its exports headed there, they're now rewiring their entire trade infrastructure. No longer betting on geography, they're betting on stability, commitment, and long-term trust. While Washington doubles down on erratic tariffs, Canada takes another path. Multilateral integration. The results speak for themselves. While foreign direct investment into Canada has risen by 9% year over year, U.S. investment into Canada has dropped by a staggering 28%. According to Bloomberg, this is the cost of America's increasingly tariff-heavy approach and the market's natural reaction to inconsistency. At the same time, Canada is expanding its reach into strategic sectors. Thanks to a $2.3 billion Indo-Pacific strategy, they've secured battery mineral supply deals with Indonesia. Simultaneously, their digital and defense relationships with the European Union have opened doors to the $150 billion SAFE Fund. While the U.S. grapples with internal dysfunction, Canada is quietly building global presence with deliberate moves. In agriculture, Canada isn't just selling wheat, they're selling a brand. Internationally, Canadian wheat stands for purity, strict quality control, and dependable delivery. That's what top importing nations are willing to pay a premium for. This strategy didn't happen overnight. It took Canada years to build. Government and industry worked closely together with long-term vision. They invested in logistics, testing labs, and internationally recognized standards. They didn't chase volume. They focused on the high-end market, better margins, less competition. Most importantly, they didn't leave their farmers behind. Their subsidy and insurance systems are efficient. Agricultural associations have real influence, and farmers are not sacrificed in political battles. The influx of Canadian goods into U.S. supermarkets reflects not only a failure in domestic production, but also a surrender in supply chain and distribution strategy. Major food distribution systems like Walmart, Costco, Safeway, and Kroger now prioritize stable, low-risk supply sources with reliable delivery schedules, something Canada is currently providing more effectively than the U.S. Once these supermarket chains shift their sourcing systems to Canada, it becomes extremely difficult for American products to reclaim shelf space. Consumers gradually develop a habit of buying imported goods, losing their connection to domestically grown food, which was once a point of pride for America's middle class. What has pushed American agriculture into this situation while everything seems to be going so well for our northern neighbor? This collapse is not the result of a single cause, but rather the outcome of a series of accumulating factors: soaring input costs, ineffective support policies, declining export markets, and a shrinking labor force. Production costs delivered the first blow. Fertilizer prices, which depend on global energy markets and supply chains, have risen by more than 250% compared to pre-pandemic levels. Diesel fuel, essential for farm machinery, has nearly doubled in just 5 years. What's even more troubling is that while expenses have soared, the prices of wheat, soybeans, and corn, the 3 primary crops for American farmers, have remained flat or even declined at times due to increasing competition from Canada. At the same time, federal subsidy and relief programs have become a source of controversy. Although Congress allocates tens of billions of dollars annually to support agriculture, disbursements are often delayed, bogged down by red tape, and distributed with little transparency. Many farmers report waiting months to receive aid, all while interest rates continue to climb and bills for inputs pile up. "We're living in uncertainty," said Travis Johnson, a farmer in the Rio Grande Valley of southern Texas. He recently lost over 1,000 acres of cotton, sorghum, and corn after a 48-hour rainstorm. Farmers in the lower Rio Grande Valley mainly export crops like sorghum, wheat, corn, and vegetables to Mexico, while importing fertilizers, agricultural equipment, and farm labor from the neighboring country. Mexico is the United States' largest trading partner, while China remains the biggest buyer of American sorghum and cotton. However, all products exported to China are now subject to tariffs of up to 125% due to new trade policies. Climate change is also a driving force, reshaping the way Americans grow, harvest, and survive on the land. But what's truly alarming isn't just the increasing frequency of extreme weather events. It's the lack of an adequate policy response from the federal government. While weather becomes more unpredictable and severe than ever, the budget for climate-related programs, the only real lifeline for many farmers, is being slashed or frozen. It's a double blow, leaving American farmers abandoned in a battle they have no tools to fight. On top of that, budget cuts to numerous climate, conservation, and local food support programs have driven up production costs, reduced yields, and harmed the environment. As a result, many crops are left unharvested, and vast fields are abandoned because farmers simply can't afford the machinery or labor to tend to them. On the trade front, the U.S. is also slowly losing the global influence it once held for decades. The withdrawal from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, allowed competitors like Canada and Australia to expand their market shares in Asia. Ongoing tensions with China, once one of the largest importers of U.S. agricultural products, have led to a sharp decline in orders from Beijing. Meanwhile, Countries like Russia and Kazakhstan are seizing new markets in the Middle East and Africa with cheap wheat, while Canada is quietly pushing its premium wheat strategy into Europe, Japan, and South Korea. And the final reason is the labor force is drying up. Thousands of farms lack workers during peak harvest season. The cause isn't just rising labor costs, but another less discussed factor: fear. Fear of sudden raids by ICE, the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. In recent months, it has increased inspections at farms, prompting many immigrant workers, whether documented or not, to stay home. They're afraid of being detained, afraid of being deported. As a result, thousands of acres go unharvested. Many farm owners are forced to abandon their crops, cut their losses, or sell underdeveloped produce at a discount just to recover part of their costs. Throughout the 20th century, the United States was nearly fully self-sufficient in food production, not only feeding its own population, but also exporting vast amounts to Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. But as more and more farms go bankrupt, farmland is abandoned and agricultural labor disappears. America's domestic food production capacity is beginning to erode significantly. So, what happens next? To be honest, the future of American agriculture isn't hard to predict. In the coming months, thousands of small and medium-sized farms, especially in the Midwest and California, will face a final choice: keep borrowing to stay in business, or shut down permanently. Many will choose the latter, not because they're lazy, but because no one is willing to risk their livelihood on a market with no buyers and a system that no longer protects them. The consequences are dreadful. Fewer and fewer people will want to work in agriculture at all. The biggest loss here isn't GDP or export revenue, it's control. When you don't control the seeds, don't control the inputs, and don't control the market, you're no longer an agricultural power. And if that happens, the U.S. will have no choice but to rely on foreign food supplies. At that point, the biggest challenge will be national security, because, as we all know, a vulnerable nation is one that can no longer feed itself. Beyond that, the U.S. faces the risk of losing export market share and trade credibility. When Canada signs trade agreements worth hundreds of billions of dollars with the EU, the UAE, and countries in the Indo-Pacific region, it means the export share America once held is being redistributed. Once those nations establish stable supply chains with Canada, a partner now seen as more reliable, returning to U.S. suppliers won't be easy. Worse still, America's trade reputation is deteriorating. Importing nations are increasingly wary of Washington's policy and stability, signing deals today, pulling out tomorrow, cutting tariffs this year, doubling them the next. Meanwhile, Canada is showing consistency, commitment, and predictability, exactly what long-term trading partners are looking for. And what about the people? How are they affected? When a farm closes down, it's not just the owner who goes bankrupt. The entire supply chain, laborers, processing plants, transporters, farm supply stores, all take a hit. As rural unemployment rises, it brings with it a wave of social problems: poverty, mass migration, ethnic tensions, especially in areas with large immigrant labor forces, and ultimately the breakdown of local communities. Over time, this fuels political frustration and erodes trust in the system, leading to consequences far beyond economics. If the United States doesn't want to lose its position as an agricultural powerhouse, it cannot afford to stand still. Change must begin with how the government views the role of this sector within the national framework. Agriculture is not just a production industry. It is the foundation of food security, exports, and social stability. When people can no longer afford food, or when the supply chain is disrupted, the entire economy pays the price. The first thing that needs reform is the subsidy system. Currently, many farmers are forced to take out high-interest loans just to keep their operations running. Meanwhile, government subsidies are slow to disperse or don't reach the right recipients. Complicated procedures often leave those who need help the most behind. If support policies are ineffective, farmers lose the incentive to grow crops. Missed seasons lead to broken supply chains, and the U.S. will increasingly have to rely on imported food in the future. In addition, policymakers need to pay greater attention to the issue of immigrant labor. About 73% of agricultural workers in the United States are immigrants, the majority of whom are either undocumented or living under temporary visa conditions that leave them vulnerable to deportation. These individuals are shouldering the hardest and most overlooked tasks, picking fruits, harvesting vegetables, working in greenhouses, and packaging and processing plants. The irony is this: